Hello and welcome to the Spending and Financial Plans module for the Jumpstart program. My name is Breck Miller. I'm with LSS Center for Financial Resources, and I'll be walking you through the material today. We're going to talk about spending and financial plans, particularly talking about putting together a spending plan, also known as a budget. Some of the pieces that go into that, some of the motivation for doing that, and also what to do with that when life happens. So, the very first piece we want to talk about with people is identifying their goals. And while people don't usually think of this in terms of a spending plan or a budget, it's a very important piece to start out with. First of all, our goals give us direction. They help us see where we want to go in life. They give us a purpose. It's kind of like jumping in the car to go out to eat, and then you sit there and look at each other because you don't know where you're going to go eat. And until you have an idea of where you're headed, there's really no point in even backing out of the driveway. So goals give us a direction in where we want to go, also in saving and spending our money. Second of all, goals also help us evaluate our needs and wants that we have in life. What's truly a need, what's truly a want, are our needs being covered, which wants are higher priority than our others. And finally, goals are important because it gives us intention. Encourage your students to be very intentional about setting their goals. Spend time thinking critically about them, write them down, review them, even go through them with other people that they trust to help them evaluate, are these good goals for me? Are there other goals that I should have in here? Are there goals that you see as important in my life, but perhaps I have not included in my list yet? It gives them that process to really help identify what's important in their life as we look at how exactly they're going to be spending and saving their money towards reaching those goals. So as you begin the process, give them the opportunity to really dream. Ask them the questions: where do you want to go? What do you want to do? What do you want to have? And also, what kind of changes would you like to make? And give them quiet time to really truly think about these. Encourage them to share. As they begin to hear others, they may piggyback off of those things and really see the possibilities that are out there for them. Now, to be honest with you, they're going to probably be thinking very big dreams. What do they want to do? They're thinking a career down the road. Even high schoolers may be thinking in terms of, I want to retire by the time I'm the age of 50. It might be an exception, but they may well be out there. And we want to respect that. We also, as we work through this, use this as an introduction towards the different types of goals that are out there. We have short-term goals. These are 0 to 3 months. Our intermediate goals, 3 months to a year, and then long-term goals, anything over a year. Oftentimes, the financial investment in reaching these goals moves upwards along with the term of the goals. So our short-term goals tend to be the least expensive, immediate, a little bit more expensive, and our long-term goals even more. Now, depending on where they're at, that may not always be the case. When I'm in class working with upcoming home buyers, they may be looking at buying a home and closing on that home in the next 2 months. Obviously, that's a large expense. So there are some outliers to that, but in general, this is the way financial responsibility tends to go with the time length of our goals as well. So, understanding that we have all of these different types of goals, we want to be intentional about getting them written down and setting them. So this is working through the SMART goals, and if you haven't worked through this, we'll look at each piece of it, and if you have, perhaps it's a little bit different look at it. First of all, you want your goals to be specific, not only so that you know what you want, but anyone else looking at them also understands what you want in this goal. The example I use is the goal of saving money. I want to save money. Okay, so what does that look like for us? Does that mean that when I go out to buy lunch today, rather than the big, grand, premium meal at McDonald's. Instead, I'm going to get the Big Mac meal and save $1.50. Yay, I've met my goal, I've saved money. Well, not exactly. That's not usually what people mean when they say, I want to save money. I want to save additional funds and have that in my savings account. So be specific about those goals so that we really truly not only know where we're headed, but also we know when we achieve those. Also make those goals measurable. Provide benchmarks for them. Get them thinking not only I want to have money in my savings account, but I want to have an additional $500 in my savings account. A lot of people forget about what I think is the most important piece of setting goals and setting a spending plan, and that's recognizing when you've accomplished those goals in that spending plan. And don't be afraid to celebrate those things when you reach those milestones. In order to do that, we have to have benchmarks so that we know when you reach them. So making goals measurable is a very crucial piece of that. Third, make sure your goals are attainable. It's okay to stretch, but we don't want to set ourselves up for failure. We want to make sure that the goal is one that we can really truly reach. Another example is that I personally would love to retire tomorrow if I could. My dream is to go out and do all of those jobs that are very worthy of being done, but don't often get done because they don't pay the bills. Now that's a dream, but it's not one of my goals because retiring tomorrow simply is not realistic for me. When we set unattainable goals, all we do is set ourselves up for failure and frustration, and the whole process begins to degrade. So make sure they're attainable. Fourth, make sure they're relevant. None of our goals exist within a vacuum. All of our goals are related and begin to impact each other. For example, if you have a student who wants to save up for college expenses, and they also want to get a car before they go, great, both great goals. But they also have to understand that the more money that they set aside for their car and spend on their car, whether it's purchase or tricking it out, making it the car that they want, that also means less money that's going into saving up for college. So it becomes an issue of prioritizing which piece is more important, and also identifying needs versus wants. I need a new car, but how much car do I really truly need, and how many of those pieces are wants? And finally, set a deadline for goals. I like deadlines. They give me an idea of when I need to be there, and also it gives me motivation to do the pieces I need to do ahead of time. So back to our goal of savings. I want to have an additional $500 in my savings account by the end of 3 months from now. So it gives us a piece. Now then we can also look at our goals. Now that's a short-term goal, but we can break that down into even smaller pieces of $500. I want to have $100 in my savings account by the end of this month. I want to have an additional $200 in my savings account by the end of next month, so that by the third month I only have to have an additional $200 that month, reaching my larger goal of $500. So break them down, make them very attainable, but also we have those deadlines to help us achieve the bigger goals. So make sure goals are SMART. This is a very helpful piece in being intentional about setting financial goals. These then begin to come together towards setting our spending plan, also known as a budget. And a lot of people are very hesitant when they hear the word budget, and there are some reasons for that. First of all, they think a budget is having to say no to things. A budget is me or someone else telling me I can't spend money. Now that's not the case at all. A spending plan is actually saying yes to your goals. It's saying yes to your dreams. It's a plan to get there. Now, it may mean you need to say no or not right now to some other pieces, But in setting their goals, we've prioritized them, and this is a way to say yes to the most important pieces in our plan. Not only is it a plan means to an end, but it's also a tool to use throughout that process to help us stay on track. It helps us with accountability and measure where we are throughout that process. Now in our spending plans, we've got three major pieces that we need to identify and put in there. First of all, we need to know our regular expenses. These will be different for everybody, and particularly when we as adults look at it, it's much different than most high schoolers. For us as adults, we may have our housing expenses, whether that's rent or mortgage, we have utilities, we have food, we have insurance, clothing, everything our kids need. We have a lot of expenses. Typically, we have more income than the average high schooler as well. High schoolers are going to have expenses and regular expenses, but they may actually be a higher percentage of their income, so they have to have the plan to account for those. It may be insurance on their vehicle, it may be a car payment, or it may be gas to put in their car, or even their entertainment fund. But these are regular expenses that they have and need to be recognized. Then we also need to fit in our goals, those bigger picture items that we wanted to achieve, and how much money is it going to take for us to achieve those goals. And then finally, the savings. And this is probably the most crucial piece. Having money and being able to plan ahead and see the bigger picture and set these savings aside in order to achieve our goals. Now, as we do this, again, we talked about prioritizing those pieces. But set the most important ones first, understanding that the lower priority items may have to slide or be put off just a little bit, but that's delayed gratification is helping us reach our more prioritized goals. And when they see the reason to say no, they are more likely to be able to manage things and put off the wants in order to achieve the higher priority needs. And then, of course, as we put together a spending plan, we have to evaluate our income versus our expenses, and that has to be balanced. So the other important piece we're going to want to talk with students about is understanding the difference between gross income and net income. They may be in a job where they're making $8 an hour, and so they base it on that. 10 hours a week at $8 an hour, that's $80. But that's not what we really have available to work with. By the time taxes come out, we may well be more like $6 an hour. And so instead of $80 a week, they now have $60 a week, and that can create a significant change for them. So as you're working with them on balancing this, make sure you're working with the net income versus the gross income and helping them understand where that difference comes in and how that is calculated. Once we have our spending plan in place, then we also need to look at our spending. Awareness is the key to success in any spending plan. As we look at where we want our money to go, we have to know where it really truly is going. It's the number one issue that most people run into. Be very intentional about it. Write it down. There are different things, different tools that you can get from different organizations, spending plans, even just a little notebook to write down what they use. There's also apps out there. One that we often talk about is Mint. They can use it on their phone. They can access it to the computer. They can sync in all their checking accounts, savings accounts, credit card accounts, and it tracks all of that for them. And it's a great tool for them to watch. They can actually set budgets right in the program. The only problem with that is it does not track their cash expenses, so they need to identify those, and they can put those in later. Make sure they're tracking for every penny that goes out. We're going to talk about spending leaks in just a minute. Also in the tracking, encourage them to use accountability. This person doesn't have to know every last detail about their finances, but even just someone to ask them once a week, hey, how's it going with your spending plan? Good, not so good, I've got to work on this. Great. That's all they need is somebody there checking in and helping them keep it as front of mind awareness. Now, I mentioned spending leaks. These are those small expenses that we don't notice going out piece by piece, but often make a very big difference in how much money we actually have available to reach our goals. When we aren't aware of them, it can be very destructive because suddenly we don't have the money and we don't know why. As you're talking and teaching spending leaks, make sure you use an example that they can relate with. And when you're doing that, calculate the cost, not just for one item, but multiply that out. For example, let's say they buy a soda out of the pop machine. That's $1.65, not a big amount. You can probably come up with that amount of change out of the couch or the console in your vehicle. But when we start to multiply that, $1.65 times 5 days a week is $8.25, times 4 weeks in a month, that's $33 a month. Calculate it out for the year, that's right at $400 a year. And let them visualize, if you had 4 $100 bills in your hands, ask them how fast they get up there to grab that out of your hands. That's very tempting for them. They like that. They want to have that money. Well, that's how much is leaking out slowly day by day when they are not tracking their spending leaks. Then we talk about savings, and there are different kinds of savings. First of all, we have our emergency savings. These are for all those expenses that we don't expect. They could be little things, they could be big things, but our number one rule is to pay yourself first. As soon as you have money come in, you immediately set some aside to go into your emergency savings. If we don't do that, it's very easy to spend money when we have access to it, or we think, I'll make up for it next month, and it begins to snowball, and it becomes so overwhelming that oftentimes we don't get to it. So put that aside first, be intentional, and have it there. Then they need to consider their own exposure and how much to set aside. For a lot of us that have higher expenses, everything at home, the house, the vehicles, the kids, we have a lot more exposure, so we need more. Those with less exposure need less savings. Typically, the recommendation is 3 months of expenses. How much you spend in 3 months, calculate it out, track it, have that much set aside. That can be a lot of money. It can be very overwhelming for people who don't have any savings. So our first recommendation is actually start exactly where you are. If you don't have anything, start with $50 a month. Work towards $100 a month or $200 a month, depending on their expenses and their income. But start somewhere, and as soon as they see success with that, it becomes much easier for them down the road to continue that and build on that. Then we also have our planned savings. These savings are not for those emergencies, but rather to reach the goals we identified at the beginning of the process. And so they're separate from the emergency savings. They may be in the same account, but we track them a little bit differently. So you can actually save towards those different planned items and those different goals and be saving for multiple items at once. But again, tie in how much you're saving towards each goal with your priorities. Save more towards the immediate priorities, perhaps less towards those longer term ones. Then life happens and situations change. Perhaps it's the loss of a job or additional expense, and oftentimes people get overwhelmed because they think, I couldn't follow my spending plan, and so they consider it a failure. That's not failure. Change is simply an opportunity to do something different, and we can change. That's not failure. Change and being able to adapt is actually a sign of success. Opportunities and challenges. Opportunities are those typically positive items that we see, new job, new income, something gets paid off so that we have extra disposable income. Challenges are those other things that tend to be more negatively associated with life. A new expense. They have an accident, they need to buy a new car, a new bill that comes up. And I'll tell you, both of those require the same amount of planning. Some research I saw was that a large number of professional athletes are actually broke within 6 years of retiring out of their sport. These are people who are getting paid up to $1 million a week to play a game. They have all this money available, but because they don't have a plan, Many of them end up broke within 6 years. So as often as challenges tend to motivate us to have a plan and to change our habits, opportunities also require the same amount of planning. So when those changes happen, start with reevaluation of your goals. Perhaps our priorities are changing, or perhaps we can meet one goal quicker, and that allows us to meet some of the bigger goals. So in summary, first of all, set your SMART goals. Be intentional about setting those goals. Take time, work with others, use your resources to make sure you have a solid start, a solid idea of where you want to go. Then set a balanced plan. Make sure that there are those expenses, but we're also reaching towards our goals, and roll those priorities into that as we decide where to spend our money and save our money. Follow the plan, track it. Awareness is key. Make sure they know where that money is going out. And with that, pay yourself first. Savings are crucial to financial stability. And finally, understand and remind them that adjustment is okay. Life happens for everyone. Plans change for all of us. The successful person is the one who adapts rather than avoids or denies change. So that's the basics of savings and spending planning. It's seemingly a simple process, and it can be a simple process when you just need to go about it intentionally and with a plan, and we can help our students find a great deal of success in whatever their dreams may be.